stop it.
Stop what?
Seeing it. All their lives, all the time. Just how do you stop seeing it?
Seeing what, Charlie?
There is so much pain, and I don't know how to not notice it.
When we've experienced trauma, frequently one of the consequences of that is flashbacks. Things that are intrusive, thoughts, images, sounds, feelings, emotions, bodily sensations, behavioral repetitions. We get thrown back into the past as if it's happening right now. Our sense of time dissolves. The past intrudes into the present. We can't tell that the past is past. It feels like it's still alive right now. Welcome to my channel. I'm a clinical psychologist. In this episode, we are going to explore the anatomy of a flashback as seen through the eyes of Charlie, played by Logan Lerman, from The Perks of Being a Wallflower. A quick trigger warning, this episode highlights the topic of trauma as well as childhood sexual abuse. So if that feels too triggering, you might want to skip this episode. So background context, Charlie is a shy, introverted high school student who has a crush on Sam, a senior who is leaving for college. He idealizes her, and there's also some underlying romantic tension between the two of them. They haven't connected because Sam has been dating a college student, Craig, who we recently found out was cheating on her. In this scene, we're going to see the beginning of their romantic encounter and how the trigger follows from that.
Just asking myself, why do I and everyone I love pick people who treat us like we're nothing?
We accept the love we think we deserve.
You can't just sit there and put everybody's lives ahead of yours and think that counts as love.
So there's the romantic encounter, which on some level is very sweet, but it also becomes a point of deepening intensity. It becomes the trigger. And you can see in his face, there's a moment of shock or tightening or confusion about something that maybe he doesn't even realize. Sometimes flashbacks come in pieces. They don't come all at once in a pure visual. Sometimes it's just a moment of, whoa, the continuity of my experience feels a little bit interrupted. Something doesn't feel like smooth and in flow. And you can see there, he just perseverates on it. It reoccurs in his mind, and he doesn't really understand why, but it's like a little flash, a flicker flash. Yeah, and there you see, right? Like time is becoming a little bit fractured in his imagination. He's here, but he's not here. He's here, but also with that like recent event. And here comes the full flood of remembrance.
Don't wake your sister.
So that's his Aunt Helen. That's his aunt who did something that's very hard to even think or understand.
It'll be our little secret, okay?
Yeah.
Charlie, she's fast asleep. Don't wake your sister.
So all of this, we're getting fragments of images of history of words, of memories, things that are in the present, things that are in the past, things that are in the distant past, violence, images, and it just becomes overwhelming. So this is what potentially a flashback feels like on the inside. It's like you're swimming in a whole sea of experience that just doesn't make sense, and it just kind of jumps on you. So let me just pause and let's go through this bit by bit, because there's so much intent evocation here. So key here is, okay, this is part of the trigger, the departure, because one of the things we know from the perks of being a wallflower is it wasn't just the act that occurred between him and his Aunt Helen. It was her driving away, him being told, this is our little secret. She drives away, right? And gets into an accident, and he doesn't know what to do with. It's confusing and disorienting. And as a kid, like, what do you do with that? If you're a kid and there's been this sexual something that you don't even know what sex is, but something strange or different has happened, but it needs to be kept secret, and it's special and it's secret, and then this horrific thing happens, and then he's just left with this secret inside, right? And it's confusing, and what happened? What's going on? There's nobody to talk about it with. You can't really make sense of what it is, what happened, what that touch was, right? The touch that his aunt, you can see just in the edges of the screen, like she touches maybe his leg, right? And we don't know the full aftermath of that, right? But it's disorienting and perhaps confusing. There's no frame with which to make sense of it. And this attempt to try and make sense of this bewildering, like, experience for which you have no understanding, no framework, no words, right? The easiest framework for a child to take frequently is that they did something wrong, that they somehow are dirty or bad or flawed or gross, right? They're the ones who created the mess, the harm, right? And in this instance, there's a big mess that actually does happen. Aunt Helen gets into a car accident, and in a child's world, there's a stage of childhood development which is very egocentric, where they think, okay, if things happen in the world, it's because of me. It's because I did something, because I made something. It's my doing. I'm at fault, or I'm bad, or these things happen because of me. And when a child is required to keep their inner world a secret, there's no way that they can untangle that. And that just frequently rattles around inside their head and torments them, like how we see it torments Charlie. So let's take a look at some of the specific moments or frames here. So I want you to take a look just at the look in Logan Lerman's eyes here. So there's a certain kind of frozenness, like he's elsewhere a little bit. You can see that some of his point of focus is not seeing Sam, actually, but kind of being seized almost by a remembrance. We see the departure. This is Sam's hand. And then we see how it's tracing back to his Aunt Helen. Right. And more pieces of the memory are coming back in fragments. The memories are coming back in fragments. This.
It'll be our little secret, okay?
Right. Okay. So we see that's fragment. There's a couple of fragments that we have here. And this is how traumatic memory frequently gets stored, as not a whole continuous narrative from beginning to finish, right? But actually little flashpoints, and then like fill in the gaps blanks, and a flashpoint and a fill in the gaps blank. It's not like one continuous cohesive remembrance. It's actually almost junctures in time. One of the things that happens during trauma is our hippocampus goes offline. The hippocampus is the part of our brain that timestamps memory, that forms it into a cohesive package and says, okay, this happened in this order in time, in this place in time. And during trauma, when we're flooded or overwhelmed by experience, time starts to break apart. So we're starting to see that reflected here. So let's take a look. We're seeing a couple ways in which time becomes disjointed, where the present glides into the past, right? With Sam's touch gliding into the touch of Aunt Helen. So there's almost this kind of time bridge of the past intruding into the present, okay? And then we'll see other little flashes that come forward as we continue. So we'll see one flash with Aunt Helen, then another flash, right? Then another flash, and it's not really a cohesive memory, but it kind of like almost like pointillistic pastel brush strokes that like, what's going on? I don't even understand what's going on. It doesn't make sense, but it's the remembrance is starting to shape and come back or flood back. So here we go. So this is Sam's touch that triggers.
I'm with your sister.
So, and he says, don't wake your sister. Don't wake your sister. Okay. Keep it secret.
It'll be our little secret, okay?
So that's another flash, right? And you can see, I just want to highlight the brilliance of the cinematography here. So this is flash number 2, and you can see there's almost like 2 separate Charlies here, because there's like, okay, there's one remembrance over here, there's another remembrance over here. I don't know what to do with it. Like the mind splits off, almost trying to hold on to the whole confusing experience. It's hard to make sense of these things, especially as a child, even as an adult. Like, what the heck is going on? Here's Aunt Helen, who's so kind and good and lovely, and I'm special, and she wants me to keep it secret, and okay, I can do that. That's special. I'm special. And then we're not supposed to wake my sister. Okay, I can do that. But it's also strange and like, what's going on? I don't quite get it. Okay, so the mind tries to hold on to these strange, difficult experiences, but it starts to break apart also.
Charlie, she's fast asleep.
Okay, so Charlie, she's fast asleep. So that's spark number 3, right? It just kind of comes into his consciousness. So this is the nature of traumatic memory, like a flash here, a flash here, a flash there. just little kind of brush strokes that seem to like, what is that? I remember this little thing and I remember this little thing. It doesn't make sense. And you can see the 1, 2, 3 Charlies here. It's like, what's going on? It's like, here's my Aunt Helen who is good, who is kind. And there's the touch and she's touching. And then it's a secret. And then I'm not supposed to wake my sister. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't make sense unless, right? There's the horrifying kind of coming to terms potentiality of what the truth is. But it's almost like that can't be. It's too overwhelming to think that, right? How could that possibly be? We're going to see Charlie hit his head against the door. And sometimes when things are just so confusing, you can't figure out what it is. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Like there's a natural impulse to try and like feel anything solid, right? Feel anything stable. And sometimes there's a lot of confusion. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand. And then you hit your head against something over and over. It doesn't make sense. What is it? What is it? What is it? Sometimes there's pain that you're trying to make fade, right? Which is possibly also what Charlie's doing here. So we see Charlie use this. It's a stereotypic behavior, kind of repetitive motion that helps to create a little bit of control and consistency in an uncontrolled thing. There's the rhythm of the self-hitting, the self-hurting, perhaps, right? That almost might drown out the hurting that's happening inside. So let's take a look. Okay, so there's the... So he's saying, I don't know if you could hear that, it's my fault. It's my fault. It's my fault. So just the repetitive phrase, my fault, my fault. The overwhelm, the traumatic moment, and then almost like seeing his whole world just start to come in flashes. There's a police officer, violence, and him saying, stop crying. Stop crying. Like, and there's the punch, and maybe even the punch at himself, the punch, and then the shot towards Aunt Helen, right? Okay. And a very important thing happens here, right? In this scene. Calls his sister. Calls his sister. Right? And there's the moment where Aunt Helen says, don't wake your sister. Don't wake your sister. But here, he wakes his sister. He calls her. He reaches out. And in my opinion, this might save his life. He wakes his sister. He calls her. He doesn't let the oppressive demand of the secret win. He actually reaches out and calls. Okay? And he calls her in a very disorganized state of being. So if you ever hear somebody calling you and they don't make sense, they're disorganized and they're not linear, or they're speaking in maybe a bizarre, even irrational, what seems irrational way, it's possible that they're in the throes of an overwhelming traumatic flashback experience. So he calls and he risks waking his sister.
Stop thinking about it.
What?
Candace killed Aunt Helen, didn't I?
Okay, he says, I killed Aunt Helen, didn't I? It's like, whoa, 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 how did you put that 1 and 1 plus 2 equals what? How did that happen? We went from, okay, these memories of perhaps kind of Sam touching him, Aunt Helen touching him, Aunt Helen telling him it was a secret, Aunt Helen saying, don't wake your sister, right? Yeah, she's sleeping, right? Touching him, it being confusing. These remembrances of her dying in a violent car accident, him hating himself, right? Him hitting himself. It's my fault, right? For the child, in the child's world, it makes sense. In the child's world, it's like this horrible thing happened and I feel horrible, right? There's this horrible, confusing experience I've had. There's a horrible external event that's happened. It's a secret. It must be because of me, right? Children frequently blame themselves. It's one of the tragic things that occur. Kids don't know that it wasn't because of them. Like, kids don't know that the abuse didn't happen because of them, right? Or a person didn't die because of them, right? Okay.
She died getting my birthday present. I killed her, right? I'm trying to stop thinking that, but I can't. She keeps driving away and dying.
Call the police and send.
Okay, so I tried to stop thinking that, but I can't. So it's almost like this. He's having both a flashback visually, so as represented by the visual flashbacks, but also a cognitive kind of perseverative flashback, right, into a certain kind of thought. It's like, my fault. I killed her. She was getting my present and she died, and it's because of me. And I have to keep it all a secret. I can't talk about it to anybody, but I know it's true. It's because of me. It's a child's logic, right? But it's locked in there, and with the flashback, it starts to just perseverate, just like a flashback, kind of comes and comes and comes. This cognitive, repetitive, sometimes they call it an emotional flashback or a cognitive flashback, where it's not a visual image that repeats, but a cognitive belief that just keeps coming and coming and coming.
Call the police and send them to my house. No, Charlie, listen to me. Mom and Dad are gonna be home with Chris any second. And
Thinking. What if I wanted her to die, Candace?
what? Charlie? Charlie!
Okay, so what if I wanted her to die? I think, yeah. So there's an interesting moment. We'll just play it back a little bit with the violence, right? The violence flashbacks start, and one of them, there's a punch, and then there's a punch, and we see Aunt Helen's face. So we don't know, right? There's him kind of hitting himself, right? Kind of the horror, the shock of the news. Hitting, unbearable. Yeah. Hitting, and then her face, okay? Interesting sequence there. Hitting. There's a flash of her face right there. Okay, and let's look at this. Logan Lerman does such an amazing job. He covers his mouth with both hands, he's being requested and required to carry a secret. So let's take a look. Stop crying. Okay, it's like, shh, stop crying. Shh, stop crying. I have to stay small, right? Even if this doesn't feel good, right? Here's the scenes of just the gap. Okay, and he's trying to feel himself. He rubs his face, and we see the past and the present blending, right? Blending, like flashing back. Okay, and he sees Aunt Helen's the cuts on her wrist, right? The cuts on her wrist that are so, I imagine for a kid, like overwhelming, terrifying, you know, and you can see just the sweetness in him, like he reaches for her, grabs her hand, and tries to be compassionate and kind. But there's a lot of ways in which things are fusing together and blending, right? The past is blending to the present. We see, right, this intercut of the past and the present between him in the past, him in the present, right? There's the cutting, right, that we see in her, and then the flash forward into him seeing the knife. So there's the past and the present are intersecting, and the past is almost coming and almost trying to grab the present and take over, right? So we see the cutting here, right, that the aunt has experienced, and then we see the knife, and we imagine that Charlie's even having thoughts there. Okay. And then we see the kind psychiatrist, psychologist there. And the inference is that the door was broken down and Charlie's now safe, right? Or at least safe enough in a place where there's people, right? So, so that's what the experience of a flashback is. And you can see as Charlie speaks in the scene that you'll see, Charlie is still a little bit disoriented. He's not completely there or with it. He's still confusing past and present, or eliding, and then almost self and other, right? Like he can't differentiate what's happening now and what's happening then. That gets confusing. What's happening inside him and what's happening inside other people, right? Like he talks about seeing the pain in other people, right? And he's not really able to differentiate, like, okay, that becomes really blended and jumbled as well. So let's take a look.
I'm back to Bert.
Where am I?
Mayview Hospital.
So he's kind of curled up in almost a fetal-ish position. Sometimes people who have experienced trauma or are in the midst of a traumatic remembrance try and find whatever container, holding environment that they can. And in this instance, you can see his body posture here, right? There's a way in which the wall is holding him and he's curled up. It's a fetal-ish position. And sometimes that's a self-protective physical posture, right? And it can help a person feel protected and supported and grounded on something stable when their whole world is shaking. Okay, so, all right.
You have to let me go. My dad can't afford it.
Oh, don't worry about that.
No. I saw them when I was little, and I don't want to be a Mayview kid. Just tell me how to stop it.
Stop what?
Seeing it.
So there's all of these things that he's been seeing boom, 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 like violence, like, or remembrances of his aunt, right? The looks on his friend's eyes, like all of these things are flashing, right? In his mind, and it kind of, it's overwhelming, it's uncomfortable, right?
All their lives, all the time, just how do you stop seeing it?
Seeing what, Charlie?
Okay, so this is something that's a good therapeutic intervention. Like if somebody says, how do I stop seeing it? Frequently, a person might invite specification or clarification, like seeing what, seeing it, because and the idea here is you're just trying to kind of come into their world, right? It's not like you're trying to pin them down. So it's not like trying to tag it, right? It's more just like, help me see what you're seeing, right? Help me understand your world. Seeing what, Charlie, right? Help me see with you, right?
Much pain, and I don't know how to not notice it.
What's hurting you?
No, not me. It's them. It's everyone. It never stops. Do you understand?
What about your Aunt Helen?
So there's a way in which Charlie's saying, like, no, not me, them out there. It never stops. And, it's a frequent defense mechanism, right? To see the pain in others as a way of avoiding pain in oneself, right? If I have pain that's unbearable, that I don't want to feel, that's too much, I have unbearable pain inside me, but I cannot bear it. But it's there. And so, because of all this pain that lives unprocessed inside, when I look into the world, what I see is a world of pain and suffering. And it's a way in which I can survive the overwhelming feeling by placing it outside of myself and seeing it out there rather than with fully feeling it and dealing with it in here. Okay? So now she invites a question. What about Aunt Helen? And it's informed by some of what the doctor, psychologist has seen. Okay, she's heard Charlie talk at night, maybe having nightmares about his Aunt Helen, and saying things maybe in a kind of a little bit of a traumatic delirium, right? Perhaps, right? And she prompts him, trying to help him piece together his life and his world. And I think it's a good intervention. I mean, it's you also always have to be delicate, right? Because it's a little bit, I don't know if it's bold, but it's like direct. It's direct, right? What about Aunt Helen? Kind of, it's a little bit firm, but also rendered with a fair amount of compassion, okay? And you need to, the more firm or directive an intervention is, the more it needs to be wrapped in compassion And Joan Cusack does a very good job with that kind of fine line of firmness mixed with loving kindness and compassion. Okay, so let's watch that again.
And
What about your Aunt Helen?
what about her?
Do you see her?
Yes, she had a terrible life. God, what am I supposed to
You said
And you can see, like, in that moment, like, just the narrative, which is true. Maybe she did have a terrible life, but there's an inner confusion that Charlie's feeling. Like, what am I supposed to say? Like the defenses are starting to get kerjumbled, right?
Yes, she had a terrible life. What am I supposed to
you said some things about her in your sleep.
I don't care.
If you want to get better, you have to.
And it's like, I don't care. Okay, it's like there's a frequently a warding off of, like, this is too much. I don't care. I can't deal with it, right? Which is a natural response to overwhelm. I don't care. I don't want to deal with it. It's too much. And again, we see the psychologist, psychiatrist, our kind doctor, try and nudge with both firmness and love, Charlie into talking, into not keeping the secret, right? And that's the moment of magic frequently in therapy, where things that are held in secret before finally find the light of day, find the voice that is never before spoken, right? So, and we see Charlie kind of struggling a little bit. He doesn't know exactly, but he starts to find the words. So let's see.
You said some things about her in your sleep.
I don't care.
If you want to get better, you have to.
She was insane. Just saying.
Okay, so he's actually confronting the really hard, confusing, like, truth, trying to speak it, not secret it away. So you can see the internal physical struggle in his face. But yeah, it's quite something. What courage.
She was insane. Just saying.
Charlie, you gonna let me help you here?
Yeah. So he's really
You remember
over.
before you blacked out?
Okay. So, yeah.
Sam's house.
Okay. So sometimes when you do the work, you go kind of towards the kind of traumatic material, right? Like of what was said during sleep. So that's a thread you can try and pull on a little bit. Sometimes, okay, I can't remember. I'm trying to remember. I don't know. It's too painful. I can't do it. okay, what can you remember, right? And just piece it back from there. That's frequently a little bit more shallow waters rather than like the deep end of the pool. So Joan Cusack's character kind of pulls Charlie a little bit back towards the shallower end by like, okay, what do you remember, right? Rather than pushing towards the nebulous, overly confusing, overwhelming. So that's I think a good choice. Yeah.
I was in the hospital for a while.
And then we see a little bit of the aftermath of Charlie's experience. Articulating it through writing is incredibly potent and powerful. So that's an incredible skill or an incredible coping mechanism and processing mechanism. It helps us metabolize our experience. Speaking the secret into larger spheres, so the spell of the secret gets broken, and bit by bit, a person's life can get mended. All right.
There he is.
And we see,
So,
here we are.
see Thursday at 6, right?
Okay.
The beat goes on. The journey of therapy. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So if you're out there suffering and wondering, will it get better? It can get better. It does get better. Like, you can make it. Like, we can make it. So hang in there. Signing off for now. Be gentle with yourself if you can. And we'll see you in the next video. All right. Take good care.